My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with CUGC HQ, and I'm so happy to welcome you to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about how to use global app configuration service. And I think that we have a full hour of information coming at you, so I think it's going to be really good. Before we get to that, though, I just have a couple of announcements for you. Our next Excel event is in New York in June, and we hope to see some of you there. It's open to all of our CUGC members, whether or not you live in the Northeast United States. You're welcome to come from anywhere. We've got a great speaker lineup, including Calvin Zhu from Citrix. I'm excited to hear what he has to say. He's going to be giving us a good tech update of what's going on these days at Citrix. Also got Carl Webster. He's a CTP fellow. I think this is going to be one of his last CUGC events, so we're excited to see him coming back as well. Also in July, if you can't make it to New York, we have our virtual Excel event, and we're still getting the lineup ready for that one, but definitely check it out. That one will be online, so you can easily attend from anywhere. Alrighty. Also, we hope you'll join our Slack or Discord channel, or both. The channels are mirrored, so you won't miss anything if you just join one. By default, you will be put into the general channels, and then if you'd like to have access to your local group, that's a private channel. So definitely follow the instructions. You'll see those when you join to get added to your local group's private channel. All right, before we get started, just a couple of notes. We are recording today's session, and you will get a recording link tomorrow. I'll send that out to you via email. Also want to invite you to put your questions into the question panel. You can add those at any time. We're going to keep an eye on those throughout the session, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can today. And then use the chat just to say hello and talk to each other. So hopefully you'll use those. It's always good to see good conversation out there. All righty, I am excited to welcome to our webinar stage Manju Oommen. She is back with us again today. Manju is the Director of Global Product Management, and with her is Prashant Yadav. He is a Senior Product Manager of Global App Configuration Service. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to the two of them. They're going to tell you a little bit more about themselves and get this session underway. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Steph. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Stephanie just introduced both of us, so let's just get started with the agenda for today. So we're going to be introducing what Global App Configuration Service is. So before we get started with how you can leverage the service and how will you actually configure the service, what we will just sit back and listen to first is in terms of what are we trying to solve. So what is the problem statement that we are essentially trying to solve with the Global App Configuration Service? And then Prashant is going to take you through how to leverage this service using an admin user interface. So we introduced a new UI at the beginning of this year, which went generally available. And he'll also take you through how the service could also be leveraged through the API developer portal. So this is an API first service. And just that you're aware, the Global App Configuration Service, in short, we call it as GACS. So if you hear me or Prashant using that term, it's essentially the app configuration service that we are referring to. So just actually stepping back and looking at what are we essentially trying to resolve with this service. So if you look at the overall end user landscape from a access point perspective, from a client app perspective, there are multiple ways to configure these settings from an end user perspective, right? So you would want to ensure the end user has a specific set of settings across the application, which today is beyond 160 odd settings, which is available on the client app side. So you can make, access those settings and configure those settings today through a group policy if you're using Windows, if through SF settings, which is web config on storefront, configuration files, default.iCard registry. So there are multiple tools available to you to manage these settings, and it's not the same tool across different operating systems. You might have to use different tools to configure these settings today. Over and above this, you may also have third-party unified endpoint management solution to manage some of these app settings and to push these settings as well. And all these aspects come into picture when it is a managed device. Now, there is a pool of devices that the end users access, depending upon the policies that you have within your organization, especially if it is a bring your own device policy that you have for employees within the organization, also contractors or third-party vendors who access the application. That's increasing pool that we have seen that is a difficult pool to manage from a settings perspective for unmanaged device, which can lead to inconsistent configuration. You could potentially get a lot of IT administrative tickets, essentially to solve something you may not have tested in your environment because the user who's accessing it might be on a different version. And also depends on the configuration and the complexity of the configuration that you have. It may also lead to some security concerns due to non-compliance, right, across how you manage these devices. Over and above this, in order to look at the scale of the problem, we do have a lot of operating system and managed devices which is existing there through which the end user access these resources. It could be Windows, it could be Mac, Android, Chrome OS, over the browser, and HTML5 experience, and cross would be Linux. Yeah, and then you also have agents. There are Citrix owned agents today, ZTNA or SPA agents, like your private access agent, or the EPA agents or device posted service agents. So if you want to enable any of these services, you potentially would like to test these services first and push these agents to the end user client. That's one aspect. The other aspect is also third-party agents like Zoom and WebEx. And if these are the collaborative tools which you leverage within the organization, within the virtual desktop or virtual apps, you also potentially need to manage these servers and push these servers to the endpoint side. So this is perhaps a view of what it looks like from an end user landscape. And in order to simplify this problem, just another step beyond this, and the resources that the users are going to be accessing could be deployed on cloud, could be deployed on-prem, or it could be both, right? It could be a hybrid environment that you have in place, and users could be accessing resource both hosted over the cloud or on-prem as well. Right. So to simplify this problem statement is why we've introduced Global App Configuration Service. It's to provide you administrators the control to manage how the end users are going to access the application access your resources across any device, whether it is hosted on-prem or on cloud. That's the ultimate goal. And the service is being introduced as an API first service. So any settings, any capabilities that we introduce is first available as an API. And then we introduced a new user interface, which was beginning of this year. Right, so there is an admin UI interface, which is available on Citrix Cloud. Though it is available on the Citrix Cloud and the service is a cloud service, it is accessible to on-prem customers as well. So, which means that you can manage your settings and push the settings to endpoints or the end users over the cloud for storefront as well. So Prashant will take you through how to establish that legit connection if you're using storefront for the cloud, how to onboard yourself on cloud service. And prior to this, we did have entitlement checks, which we are actually moving away, which basically means that any customer, any of you who are using on-prem or cloud should be able to access this service, irrespective of the entitlement that you have. So, and the additional aspect is the aspect of across all operating systems. We do have settings which is different for each operating systems because the client applications is optimized for each operating system. So the settings are different. And these settings could be managed centrally and pushed to the endpoint device. That's one of the main capability. One of the aspects that I also want to highlight it, we do support all operating system on mobile as well as desktop, except for Linux today, thin client ecosystem. So as far as thin client ecosystem is concerned, they have their own management console. However, we are investigating the need to incorporate Linux into the mix of the operating system support and, the need to centrally manage these settings as well and push it to the endpoint. So if any of you feel that is going to be useful, drop a note on the chat and we make note of it as well. So we are actually investigating that aspect as well. The other key advantage that you can potentially have using the global app configuration service is the admin control with respect to the app versions. So auto update and update management in general. So the Workspace app versions that you want to update and push to the end user client is supported through global app configuration service through the APIs today. And it is supported across Windows and Mac. Now, there is also version control that we support with N-2. So if the latest version is N up to N-2, depending upon your policies that you have internally, you can test a specific version and push that version to the end users at an N-2 capacity. And on the agent side as well, we do support agent management. So which is your third-party agents, which is Oommen WebEx agent, as well as your Citrix own agent, which is your EPA or ZTNA agents, could be also pushed to the end user. We don't support versions there. We support the agent itself. So you can test, package the agent and push it. So in order, instead of you testing and packaging it and pushing it out, you can leverage the service to actually push this agent out to the end user client. Just a caveat here, agent management is supported for cloud today. We are in the process of making it available for on-prem customers as well. So this service is applicable across managed and unmanaged device. So this is not an alternative to your endpoint management solution like the AirWatch or Intune or Citrix endpoint management. This is purely a client application management solution. Yeah, so which means that all the settings on the client app could be managed centrally using this service, which also means that it includes post-store configurations. Pre-store configuration, you can still continue to use your endpoint management solution that you're using. Right? And features like capabilities like app protection or enterprise browser, which is the latest flagship products that we have introduced, can be managed through the global app configuration, onboarded and managed, configured, managed, and updated through global app configuration service. So that's the overall solution. So what does it consist of? Just to go into a little bit of detail of what the service overall is and what are the components which is part of the service. One part of it is auto discovery service. So if you require email discovery service, you don't want your users to enter the store URL, instead you would want them to get started with an email, then you can use the auto discovery service. But in addition to that, the service is also leveraged to create a legit connection for storefront or for on-prem environment to the cloud service. So when you want to onboard yourself to Citrix Cloud to leverage this particular service, one of the steps that you need to do is within the auto discovery service is to establish that legit connection to the Citrix Cloud, so that once your store URL establishes this connection, you can push those settings to the stores. Yeah. So that's one aspect of global app configuration service piece. The other aspect is all your client app settings and policies, which was earlier managed through different configuration tools, can be centrally managed here. So which includes your enterprise browser app protection settings, whether it is screenshot capture or key logging settings that you want to manage and push through centrally from this service to the end user endpoint. This service could be leveraged for that. The same thing with enterprise browser. All your CVAD settings, which could be to do with your clipboard, the printing capabilities that you want to make available across operating system, all can be managed through the client app settings and policies within the global app configuration service. Peripheral audio and display settings, login and authentication settings, data collection, and finally app preferences. So this amounts to more than 160 odd settings that could be pushed through the global app configuration service. Just a quick note, today these settings are applied at the store level and apply to settings across the store. I think Prashant is going to take you through how those different settings could be pushed through. Just FYI, we don't support user group yet, but it's something that we are evolving to support. The next is agent management. I quickly brief through what we do from an agent management perspective. Do also note from a third-party agent aspect, today we support Zoom and WebEx. We are always in the lookout of what are the other third-party agents that will be useful for you to manage through the global app configuration service, because that's an agent which is required from a Citrix Workspace app as well. For example, if you're using Control App, right? So if that is a third-party agent, which potentially in your organization, you would like to manage and push those agents to your endpoint, you can let us know. We're constantly looking at what are the additional third-party agents that we can potentially add to this pool, which will enable you to manage the Workspace app experience for your end users across any operating system. That's one thing I wanted to just quickly make note of. The other aspect is auto update service. So we did touch upon this. Or update management in general. The Workspace app version management could be done through the global app configuration service. Today it is supported over the API. It will also be available on the user interface as well. So just before, this is what the user interface looks like. So we introduced this early this year. It's gone generally available. There is these are the settings that you can actually configure and push to the end user. And you can also, test it out using a test channel as well. So just before we get started, as I mentioned, this is an API first service. What that potentially means is all the settings, all the capabilities are first available on API. We are still evolving on the user interface. So you would see, as you go forward, you would definitely see a lot more improvements to what exists today, because we're constantly trying to get feedback. So if any of you haven't tried out, do try it out and feed us back with more and more feedback so we can improve our experience as well. And you would also potentially see that some of the capabilities which is available on the API side is not available yet on the UI side, but we are, as I mentioned, continuously improving it to incorporate from a parity perspective between API and the UI interface as well. That is all so that's it from my end, and I'm going to hand it over to Prashant, who will take you through how to get started with the global app configuration service.
All right, thank you, Manju. I'll quickly go ahead and present my screen. All right, I hope my screen is visible.
It is.
All right, okay. So till now you understood how global app config service can help you manage settings across different scenarios, be it managed device or be it a BYOD device. And now we will talk about how you can actually implement the global app config service and what are the things that you need to know before you get started. So as Manju was mentioning, all of these configurations are mapped to your store URL. So that's your beginning point. Whatever settings that is being configured, that is going to map to the particular store that you have configured it for. And today we are able to support both the on-prem as well as the cloud scenario. So as an admin, what you need to know is if you are trying to configure global app config service for a storefront URL, it is going to be a two-step process. The first step is going to involve claiming your storefront URL using the auto discovery service, which is a different service as compared to the global app config. It helps you do the URL claim and the domain claim and other aspects of it. But from a storefront perspective, you need to claim your storefront URL first. And after that, you can use the global app config service to start discovering the settings. And when it comes to Workspace application, because you're already associated to a Citrix Cloud account, you can directly use the global app config service to start configuring the settings for your different endpoints. So as we were talking about auto discovery service, we are not going to go too deep into the auto discovery service, but I will like to mention that auto discovery service also helps you with the email-based discovery for your accounts. So in case you want your users to just use the email address and you want the application to figure out from the domain that this is going to be my store URL and fetch all the settings for yourself, you can leverage auto discovery service as well. Auto discovery service will also include doing a domain claim, and that will help you do the email-based discovery at a later point of time. So before we move ahead, we will also like to understand how your Citrix deployment looks like today. So there is a poll that we would want to provide it to you. So how does your deployment look like? Are you completely on cloud? Are you hybrid, which basically means you have one or more of the components on cloud today? And are you on-prem, but you provide internet access to your users, or are you on-prem with a restricted environment where you don't provide any internet access?
I'll let that go just a few more seconds. We're getting, I think, most answered. So close it out in about 2 seconds. All right, and there's your results. Can you see those?
All right. Yeah, I can see the result. Thank you so much. So yeah, I just want to share at this point of time, if you are on premises and you don't provide any internet access, we would require that for global app config service, because it is a cloud-based service. We would require you to whitelist certain URLs which the client needs to interact with in order to start fetching those settings. And also, if you have one of the components of the cloud, it will also help you. It will also help you when we later bring in the user group support. So with that, I would like to move to the next aspect, which is basically claiming your storefront URL. So we talked about in case of storefront, you need to start with claiming your storefront URL. So that is going to again involve onboarding to Citrix Cloud. If you don't have a Citrix Cloud account today, we would recommend that you onboard to one using onboarding.cloud.com. And after that, you will have to go to the next URL, which is your adsui.cloud.com, which is basically your auto discovery service. And in the auto discovery service, you will have to provide your storefront URL and you need to copy the generated token. And once you have done that, the next step involves creating and configuring a responder action and policy within your NextScaler to complete the process. So in case you are not fronting storefront with a NextScaler, you will have to directly connect with the Citrix team and we will help you whitelist your URL so that you are able to configure directly for it. So the steps to create and configure the responder policy is mentioned on the developer.cloud.com. So developer.cloud.com is the developer API portal from Citrix. You will also find a lot of documentation around the global app config service present over there. So that is going to be your first step. And also, as we mentioned, we are removing any entitlement requirement for the global app config service. So it should be possible for you to just onboard to the Citrix Cloud and start using the service. Okay, so what are the different options that you have today to configure the settings? As we were talking about the developer.cloud.com, it is the API first approach. So anything that we are building with global app config service, it is first onboarded on the API portal. And later on, we try to move all of that to the admin user interface as well. So anyone who is comfortable with the APIs might, and also have a great amount of requirement for customized options, might want to go with the API only approach. But the admin user interface is going to be really convenient if you have multiple stores that you are trying to manage, because the user interface is going to really make it convenient for you to switch between the stores, discover the different settings and configure values around it as well. So you can see how that admin UI looks like on the right side of the screen.
Prashant, I think we have a comment that there is potentially an audio issue. So you may want to slow down as well a little bit. So okay. Yeah, come a bit closer to your speaker. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, so we can move into how global app config service can be managed via the admin user interface. So on the admin user interface, as we mentioned, you need to have a Citrix Cloud account as the basic minimum to get started with this service. So you need to go to onboarding.cloud.com and create an account for yourself. And after that, you can go to citrix.cloud.com and you can click on the hamburger option on the top left corner, and you will find that there is one particular option called workspace configuration. Within the workspace configuration, you will again find a tab called app configuration, and that is where all the settings for the global app config service lies today. So in case you don't have any cloud presence, you have any cloud entitlement at all today, and you onboard to Citrix Cloud, you might face an issue where you are not seeing the workspace configuration as an option present. So I would like to tell you that this is something that we are trying to mitigate. We are trying to ensure that the app configuration tab is going to get shown for every customer, irrespective of whether you have a cloud entitlement or not. So if you don't see it today, you can go ahead with the API approach. You can use the developer.cloud.com portal. You will be able to access the APIs, but in future, you will see that this user interface is being made available to you as well. Okay, moving ahead, I will like to talk about the different capabilities that this particular user interface provides to you. So you can see there is something called workspace URL. This is a store URL that you have already selected, and any settings that you configure at this point of time are going to map to this particular URL itself. And below that, you can see we have a set of categories for the workspace app, as we were talking that we have around 160 plus settings. And these settings are categorized around app protection, CVAD or DAS setting, enterprise browser, anything related to auto update, and the agent management, etc. So you can shuffle between all of these categories, look at the different settings that is present today, and you can configure them at a per platform basis. Also, the user interface allows you to access multiple store URLs. So if you click on the switch URL, you will see an option where all your stores will be listed. So in case you have a storefront URL and you have done the URL claim, you will see that your storefront URL also gets listed on this particular user interface. And if you have multiple workspace URL or multiple storefront URL, all of those will be listed. You can switch between them and accordingly configure settings to that particular store itself.
So a quick question, Prashant, before you move forward. So if the gateway URL is public URL, typically that's the case, and the store URL is internal only, which is a dot local URL, can we establish the connection and push the settings to the storefront URL? It's an internal URL, which means no internet.
But will it be? I mean, we can get it checked with the team, but my understanding is if the internal URL and the gateway URL can interact between each other, I think we will be able to push the settings, because whatever is your GSLB URL, which is the Netscaler URL, you can configure settings at that level. But it will be great to get it confirmed and
Yes,
give you the specific answer.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. As an optional step, we have also recently released something called channel support with the global app config service. So you can see that there is one particular toggle which currently says production. If you click on that toggle, it will move to the test channel. And what this channel support basically does is it allows the administrators to test the setting before they are rolling it out to all the users. So as an admin, you can identify a few set of users who you might want to test the settings with first, get the confidence that the setting is getting reflected as you would want to, and then you can take a call to roll it out to all your users. So you can configure anything in the test channel, and you will need to ask those individuals to enroll into the test channel so that their workspace client is able to fetch the settings that are assigned to them. And once you get that confidence, you can push the settings to all the users that you have in your company. So the steps to enroll into the test channel is different for different clients. So if you have Workspace app for Windows, that step would be slightly different as compared to Mac, as compared to Android and iOS. So all of that is documented in the developer.cloud.com or the Citrix docs. So you will be able to find those steps to enroll those users and get started with the channel support as well. Okay. So this is a summary of how the entire user interface looks like. You can see again all the different settings that you have on the left. You can switch between all of these settings, and each of these are mapped to a particular platform. So if a particular setting is applicable only to Windows, it will show up for Windows and you will be able to configure it. Similarly, if there are settings which map to other platforms, it will get shown up in that particular fashion. That being said, there is a scope to improve the user interface, and that is something that we are actively working on. We have got a lot of good feedback from the customers, and we are trying to continuously improve this experience. So what happens once you have decided that these are the settings that you want to configure. Say, for example, you have 5 settings that you decided to configure, and now you are planning to publish them. So from a user interface point of view, you can see that we have added a new option which says review 5 unsaved settings. So this is basically going to give you a difference of what your, give you a view of what the setting value was previously and what is the new value that you are trying to move to. So this summary will help you understand if the changes are as you intended it to be, and you can then take a call to publish these drafts. And once you publish it, then the global app config service will save those settings. And next time the client interacts with the global app config service, it will be able to fetch these new values. So that's how the entire admin UI experience looks like today. And now moving on, we saw how the admin UI is, but the next question that might be in your mind is, okay, I published the setting as an admin, but what does the experience look like from an end user perspective? So how can I be sure about how these settings are getting applied and managed on the Workspace app? So one of the questions that we get is, what is the precedence for the settings that are getting fetched from multiple places or can be modified at multiple places? So the priority order for that today is that GPO gets the first priority, then you have the global app config service, and then you have registry. And also, what is the time taken for the first time user, the person who is adding the store for the first time, to fetch these settings? So as soon as the user adds the store, you can start, the client will start fetching the settings associated to that store itself. But if the user is already logged in, then the time taken to fetch the setting is different because it depends upon the workflow for the Workspace application, and that depends across different platforms. In case of Windows and Mac, the client will be talking to the global app config service every 6 hours, and it's that point of time when it will be able to fetch those settings. So it might take up to 6 hours. In case of HTML5 and Chrome, the time taken to apply these settings can be 3 hours. And again, in case of iOS and Android, the time taken to apply these settings will be 6 hours. And another question we receive is, what if my users are on multiple stores? What if I have a contractor kind of a user who is working for 2 different enterprises, and both the enterprises are using Citrix and they have their own stores added? So in that particular case, unfortunately, we only support one global app config service enabled store today. So if you're going to add another global app config store, the experience is going to be different on different platforms. In case of Windows and Mac, we won't allow you to add another store which is configured through global app config service at all. In case of Android and iOS, you can add another storefront store, but you cannot add another cloud store in case of Android and iOS. And in case of HTML5 and Chrome, you can add a second global app config service enabled store, but the settings will always be accepted from the most recent store. So the settings which was configured from the first store is going to get overridden by the second store in case of HTML5 and Chrome. And another disclaimer that I want to give at this point of time is we are continuously improving the service. We have got some of the feedback that some of this experience can be better, and we are also trying to work in that direction. So some of the answers to the question can change in future. And we would also like to understand if any of these is a concern for you. So we can also focus on those aspects more as compared to other things. So that's how the settings are getting managed today. And another aspect around the service that I want to talk about is the Workspace app version control. Because through global app config service, we are seeing a lot of traction for few of the features, which is one is, of course, the CVAD and DAS setting that everyone wants to manage. Apart from that, we are seeing a lot of the customers are trying to manage app protection settings, enterprise browser settings. And another big thing is the Workspace app version control and the agent management. So I would like to address the Workspace app version control aspect here. So in case of Workspace app version control, you can upgrade to any of the recent 3 versions of Workspace app on Windows and Mac. This version control option is only available via the REST APIs, and we are working on onboarding this to the user interface. So you will see that in future as well. And in case of Windows, version control is already generally available, but in case of Mac, it is in tech preview. And you can see that we have shared the payload of how the auto update JSON would look like on the right side. So over here, you need to understand that you need to keep upgrade to latest as false if you are trying to do version control. Otherwise, the client would always move to the latest version. The stream is going to be current. The LTSR stream does not support version control today, but Global App Config Service does allow you to switch to a LTSR stream, but you cannot do a version control with LTSR. So this is only going to be applicable with the current releases at this point of time. And the maximum allowed version is something that you would want to change. You could go to the Citrix download section. You can see what is the version of the current build, and you will have to put that version as the input in this payload. The minimum allowed version stays at 0.0.0.0. So this is how the Workspace app version control works, and rest of the values is more or less optional. Something such as plugin name and plugin ID is going to be same always. So when we build the user interface for it, the experience becomes much more convenient. But with the payload, you need to understand that there are certain things which are going to remain permanent in this JSON, but there are certain things that you have to change the value for.
Prashant, there's further request for you to speak a bit slower.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll try to go a bit slow.
Yeah. At this pace is fine, the way that you're speaking now.
Okay. All right. Yeah, then talking about the Citrix and the third-party agent management. So one difference with the auto update version control is the third-party agent management. We don't provide version control to it, always upgrades to the latest version. And the supported agents, as we discussed previously, is endpoint analysis agent. We have secure access agent or the ZTNA. Then we have Zoom, and then we have WebEx. WebEx is in tech preview right now. And the setting the UI as well as the API. And what you need to do over here is you need to put the upgrade to latest config as true. And the maximum allowed version is something that Citrix is going to provide you. You need to use the same version. It cannot be a different version. Otherwise, you can see an issue. And the rest of the options is recommended to keep the same. And plugin name and plugin ID is again going to be documented in the Citrix documentation. You need to pick it from there. So yeah, we know that this experience is not very ideal. It requires a lot. It is a bit hacky, but we are trying to improve this. And you will see when we bring an improved user interface, this experience is going to get enhanced by a lot. And another thing which Manju also mentioned, and I would like to reiterate, is agent management is supported for cloud stores. But at the same point of time, we are working on providing or extending the support with Storefront. And this is something that you will see coming out soon as well. All right. So we have another poll over here just to understand how your Citrix deployment looks like. So do you have users who are accessing Citrix Workspace app over either web browser or system browser? Or do you use natively installed client apps? Or do you start from browser, but the session launch happens on the native application, or you have all of these scenarios? So that is something we would like to understand.
All right, give it just a couple more seconds. We have a lot of all of the above for sure. And it looks like most of you have voted, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and share that. So yeah, you can see a lot of all of the above.
Yeah, good to know.
Yes, thanks for the feedback. So the third option that we have over here, which is login over the web and client app installed for session launch. So that is one aspect that the Global App Config Service is yet to support. We have Global App Config Service support HTML5 and Chrome OS, which will cover your access via the browser. Then we also have natively installed client app support for Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS. Linux is the exception. But the third option is something that we are again looking to support. And it's good to know that it is a big use case for all of you. So this is going to be a roadmap item for us. Yeah, and another thing that we want to check before we move on is, do you also manage end user app settings at a user group level?
Okay, I'm getting close, just a couple more seconds. All right, yeah, big yes.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
8%,
So
yes. So I think the 32% can definitely try this solution now, right? So because we apply these settings at the store level, you continue to give us feedback. User group is also an area that we want to invest in. So that's also a roadmap item.
yeah, so any setting that you are applying today for a store URL, it is applicable to each and every user. So this is one of the feedback that we have got in the past as well, that some of the customers have different user bases, different kind of user base, and they want to provide different settings to each of them. So that would require us to bring in the support for user group. And again, that is on our radar, and we are working on it at this point of time. Thanks for the feedback. Okay, so the next aspect is if you don't have the admin UI and you want to use the developer portal, what would the steps look like for you to get started on the developer portal? So again, to begin with, if you don't have a Citrix Cloud account, go ahead and create an account. And in the REST API approach, you won't have any problem whatsoever to get started. Just create an account and then log into the citrix.cloud.com. You will have identity and access management available to you. Go ahead and create an API client. This API client is going to help us verify that you are authenticated while you make those API requests. So this is going to be your initial step. These are the prerequisites for using any of the APIs on the developer portal today. So once you are done with all of these 3 steps, then you can go and access the global app config service section within the Citrix developer portal. So you can see that there is a particular option called products with a down arrow. If you go into the products, and you will find a Citrix Workspace app section. And within the Citrix Workspace app section, you will find global app config service. And within global app config service, in the API exploration section, you will have all the APIs that you can invoke today. And there is an invoke API option. You will need to click on that. Once you click, these options becomes editable and you can directly use them. Alternatively, if you are more comfortable with Postman, you can do that as well. But this particular user interface sort of increases the convenience if you are trying to use the APIs. And a lot of documentation is available in the introduction section. There is overview, there is getting started. And if you're getting into trouble, then you will also have troubleshooting section, which will try to address the different response codes that you are getting when you are trying to make a particular call. So this is how the developer portal looks like in general. And API, you will be asked for 4 header parameters. Citrix customer ID is your Citrix Cloud customer ID. That part will be taken care by API grid that we created on the last page or on the last slide. In the last slide, when we created an API client, it had a client ID field and a secret field. So when you click on generate here, it will ask you for those 2 options, and it will generate a bearer token for you. And that bearer token is going to provide you the authorization to make these calls. And the last 2 options are optional, and you can leave it vacant. All right. So if you are trying to configure the settings, where do you find the settings? How do you update the payload? Those might be the general questions you might have. So you can see what a sample payload looks like on the right. So Windows is the platform that you are trying to configure for. In case of any other platform, that would change to Windows or Mac or Android or iOS, Chrome OS, and so on. And within that, you have something called category, which is a string kind of a value, which is the type. And you can see on the left side, we have a platform name, we have the category name, we have the setting name, and what are the values it can accept. So on the developer portal itself, you will find this particular section, which has all the updated list of the things that we are supporting today. You will be able to find the corresponding value and populate that in the payload. So for example, if you wanted to hide the DPI setting in case of Windows. In the category section, you will be putting root, and within the settings, you will, within the curly braces, the name would be your hide DPI settings, and the value accepted would be either true or false, depending on what do you want to do. So that's how the entire payload can get populated. So use the table on the left to populate your body and make a request to update the GCS settings that you have. And moving ahead, what are the different workflows that you might have a need for when using the global app config service? So if you are a first-time user and you are trying to use a storefront, start with claiming your storefront URL. That is through the auto discovery service user interface that we talked about in the beginning. Then you can create a settings record for the workspace URL for a specific store URL. For that, we have a call in the API exploration section, which is post/settings/app. And in the app name, you have to always put workspace app. We have made it configurable in case we have to support any other application, then that needs. But today we are only talking about the workspace app. So in your case, you would be putting workspace as the option /URL. And then you can make the post request using the payload that we saw in the previous slide. As you have made this request, and if you are getting a success, you can actually make a get call corresponding to the particular app and the store URL that you have. So in the request, you can see the last option includes URL again. So this is your store URL. You need to convert your store URL into base 64 encoding, and then you need to make this particular call. And once you make this call, you will see all the settings that you have configured for the app on the specific store that you are trying to manage the settings for. So that's how it works for the first-time user. Now, if the requirement is that you have already configured certain set of settings and in future you want to update them, so for that you have another request called put request. You can go to the put section under the API exploration, again provide the app name and URL and change the particular settings. The payload remains the same as what you would have done with post, but it will update the value at this point of time. And after that, you can again make a get call to verify that whatever value you try to configure for is reflecting at this point in time. So that's how the update existing settings record works.
One quick question, Prashant. So can you lock down or restrict the source IP address from which calls to API using the key or secret? Can that be done?
Okay, can you repeat the question? Can we lock down the
or restrict the source IP address from which it calls the API?
I don't.
Can we restrict the IP address from which actually will make these API calls?
Okay, I don't think the service in itself can do that. It can be more of a NetScaler side of the thing, but yeah, if you can put this question over email, we will address that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, are there any other questions that I should be addressing right now?
No, I think there's one question which I was expecting as well as, and something that we need to work on is how can you validate the settings that applied to the end user client? Right. So how do you see that the settings you have pushed through from the GAC side is already applied on the end user side? So that's something that we're internally also discussing in terms of how will we enable to see that these settings are actually applied or not. So that's an area that we need to figure out. Or Prashant, do you have any answer? I don't think we're still investigating how we can enable that, right?
Yeah, so today you cannot, I mean, you need to actually go and check the values for it automatically. There is no troubleshooting tool or a tool of that sort that will tell you that the setting is already fetched. So that is going to be more of a manual thing. But yeah, it's a good feedback that we can try to incorporate at a later point of time.
So even in a manual way on the client side, is there any manual way today? Will it get reflected
I mean, you need to go and manually check those values.
On
in
the
case it-
client, on the user end.
Yeah,
that-
at the end user level, you will need to check for it. All right. So yeah, similarly, if you are trying to delete all the settings associated to a particular store, you have the delete call. When you make this particular call, this call has no body that you need to give or the payload that you need to give. What this will do is for the particular store URL, it will delete all the settings that were configured by you. So if you want to do a fresh start, that might be a call that you will look forward to. And yeah, I mean, the get call is always a confirmation call that your values have reflected as you would have intended it to. And we also talked about the channel support when we were talking about the admin user interface. When it comes to the API, we have a separate API endpoint specifically for the channel support. And one of the benefits that you will get in the API route is that we can support up to 4 test channels when it comes to the API. But in the case of admin user interface, we have started with just 1 test channel. So either you are on a test channel or you are on a production. So in case in your particular scenario, you would want to have multiple test channels, APIs will help you out in a better fashion. So you would have to make another request, which is a post request. And in the post request, you will need to add in the body settings channel and the channel name. So the channel name will change from test rollout channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's how the naming convention is today. And we have also got one of the requests from some of the customers that we want to have a custom name for the test channel. So that is not possible today, but we are again exploring that option, and we will try to figure out if we can bring that in the future as well. So these are the 4 test channel names that you have. And then if you are trying to fetch a setting that is particular to the test channel that you configured for, in the get request, you will have the URL where you are adding /channel name. So whatever channel name you have tried to configure it for, you need to put that channel name. And for that specific channel itself, you will get all the set of settings. So that's how the entire channel management works in case of the API approach. So yeah, I think that is all the content that we had that we wanted to share. I know I went a little fast somewhere in between. If there is any question about revisiting certain slides, do let me know. I think we have around 5-6 minutes. Maybe we can talk about it if there is a certain slide that you would want me to revisit. Or if you have any questions, we can address that as well.
Okay, there's a scenario Brian had mentioned. So what if the native app is configured with the store and the user is auto logged in with single sign-on, but out of habit, they just use the web browser and then session launch happens in native app. So this again becomes a hybrid launch, Brian, so which means the settings won't be applied. And the settings which you have pushed through from a user settings through GAX will only apply when the user logs in through the client application, which is the CW app. But this is a scenario possibly we can look at separately as well, that they typically log in. But if they've logged in through the browser, this is going to be the case, and most likely case which will happen. That's one. A follow-up to the previous question, Prashant, is there a registry collection we can reference to in the meantime to see if the settings have been applied? That's again going back to the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is something that would need to be done at an end user level. I think we will be able to provide the registry values, but yeah, I think the way to check won't be easy. I mean, you will have to check at an end user level.
Okay, can you cover the test channel process again? You were breaking in between, your audio was also breaking. So can you just take them through the test channel? We have like 6 minutes, so we can do that.
All right. I'll take you through the user interface part first, and then maybe we can talk about the API as well. So yeah, so in the test channel, when you go to the UI, you have a particular toggle that talks about the channel. aspect of it. So by default, it is in production. If you click on it, you can move to the test channel as well. And for a particular workspace URL, for example, you can be on abc.cloud.com, and you might want to have, say you have 1,000 users, out of which 15 or 20 users are your early adopters or are the admins with whom you want to test the settings first. So you can ask those 15 to 20 users to enroll into the test channel. How they would enroll it on the test channel depends on the client that they are using. If they are a Windows user, enrolling into the test channel is a different process. If you are a Mac user, enrolling into a test channel is different process. Similar for Android and iOS. And all of that is documented in developer.cloud.com or the docs.citrix.com. In case you find any gap over there, you can directly reach out to us and we will help you out in enrolling your users. So once, say you have these 20 users enrolled into the test channel, you can use the user interface and you can configure settings that you want to roll out for those 20 users. And once you have configured the settings, the process is very similar, or it's exactly the same, be it test or production. Once you have configured the settings, what you would be expected to do is just go ahead and publish those settings that we are trying to do over here. You click on publish drafts and those settings will get published for your 20 users. Now, those users can check if the experience as you would expect it to be, or you want to modify some other settings and change the experience. Once you feel confident, you can move the toggle to production and then publish the same set of settings for all of your users. And that it is basically an approach to give you confidence about the settings that you are trying to roll out for your users today. So that's the test channels approach. And in case of API, what we were mentioning was that with APIs, you will have the option to have more than one test channel. So in the user interface, you saw that we had just one test channel that can be accessed. But in case of API, you can have support for up to 4 test channels today. And you can have a different set of settings mapped to different test channels. So it is up to you on how you are using the test channel. In some cases, people use it just for the testing purposes, but in some cases, people are also trying to figure out that if we can onboard certain set of users to a particular test channel, provide them different settings, and then provide another set of settings to a different test channel. So that depends on the problem that you are trying to solve. And some of it will also be solved when we bring in the user group support. But with the channel support, you have the option to test out a certain set of settings before you decide to move it to production. So that's how it works.
Okay, yet another question. I think we kind of addressed this. So if we have internal users, that is users on-prem that go straight to storefront, no ADC or no gateway, does GAX support this scenario? Or is ADC or gateway mandatory or NetScaler mandatory? So I think I addressed this question, and a similar question was there on the chat, and I addressed this, that today you would require Citrix help to ensure that we list those URLs at the backend and make it accessible to you to push the settings. You would not be able to use the auto discovery service to directly claim the URL and establish the connection. Prashant, I'm guessing let me know if you need to correct me.
Yeah, I mean, you will need to create a ticket with Citrix, and our team will make the backend changes that are necessary for it, but it can be supported. That's the thing. You won't be able to use the auto discovery service if you don't have NetScaler, but that would be more of a backend change that we will need to make. So request you to create a ticket with Citrix, provide us with your URLs and necessary information, and we will make the changes directly in the backend.
Thank you. Okay, can you we just have 1 minute. Is support prepared to assist with GAX issue? Yes, we are in the process of getting everyone in place to support GAX issue. GAX is a generally available solution, so please raise support tickets. Yeah, if at all you have any support issues. Okay, so since we are at the top of the hour, and I know there's a question on demonstrating get and post commands. I mean, I would suggest that you can reach out to, your sales team or one of us in some form, and we can actually schedule a sessions exclusively to take you through how do you leverage the get and post commands, or leverage APIs to push settings as well.
Okay, and I do see a number of questions about being able to get the presentation. So I will have the recording ready tomorrow. Are you going to make the slide deck available again?
We can make this available. Yes.
Okay, I can include it with the email and the recording. Are there any other questions you want to address real quick, or are we good?
Sure. Jim's question on how would some of this come into play with the M&A and storefront workspace serving multiple sites. So it's going to be a multi-store scenario. So when one of the aspects which will come into picture is that if you're talking from an end user perspective, accessing multi-store, the store settings that you can apply is single store. So we don't yet handle multi-store scenario. So if the user wants to move from one store to the other, the settings is not applied. If you applied a different set of settings for a different set of stores, we are yet to handle that scenario, but that's part of the roadmap.
Okay, a lot of questions today.
Good to see that. And
Yeah.
please trying the service and ask more questions in different ways. And if you can reach out to Citrix, please do so, and we can schedule different sessions if required as well. If you need a follow-up session, probably in a couple of months' time, we will have some enhancements, and we can have a follow-up session on this service as well.
Okay, I heard that. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Manju, for coming back. And thank you, Prashant, for joining her today. I appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everyone. Thank you.
All right. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day. Be on the lookout, for the recording tomorrow. And I will send all of the questions back to this team and just in case there's anything else that needs to be addressed. And what I'll probably do is include everything in a wrap-up blog post tomorrow at the CUGC site. So I'll include a link to that as well. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day and your evening.
Thank you.
We'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks. Bye.